Imagine this. It is August 1945. A blinding flash tears open the sky above Hiroshima. A mushroom cloud rises, and in that single moment, centuries of tradition, power, and ambition collapse into silence. Japan, once a proud empire, kneels in surrender. But here's the paradox. From the ashes of destruction, Japan rises again. Faster, stronger, and more influential than almost any other nation in modern history. So how did this small, mountainous chain of islands, once isolated from the world, torn apart by civil wars and ruled by sword-wielding warlords, transform into a global superpower of technology, culture, and resilience? To understand Japan, we need to travel back, far back, past the samurai, past the shoguns, past the castles and cherry blossoms, back to the beginning, to a time when gods were said to have created the very land itself. This is the story of Japan. Japan's earliest history isn't written in books. It's whispered through pottery shards, stone tools, and the legends of gods. According to mythology, Japan was created when the deities Izanagi and Izanami stirred the ocean with a jeweled spear, forming the islands as droplets fell from its tip. Their children became gods of the sea, wind, storms, and even the sun itself. Amaterasu, the sun goddess, from whom Japan's emperors claim descent. But archaeology tells another story. Long before emperors, before written records, there were the Jaman people, hunter-gatherers who lived in Japan as far back as 14,000 BCE. They made some of the world's oldest pottery, decorated with swirling rope-like patterns. For thousands of years, they thrived in villages, living off fish, nuts, and game. Then came the Yayoi period, around 300 BC. Migrants from the Asian mainland brought something revolutionary: rice farming, bronze, and iron. Suddenly, villages became more complex. Society developed classes. Land meant power. Japan was transforming from scattered tribes into something closer to a state. And at the heart of this transformation was an idea that some people were closer to the gods than others. The foundation of Imperial Japan had been laid. By the 3rd century CE, one clan rose above the rest, the Yamato. They claimed descent from Amaterasu, the sun goddess, and positioned themselves as divine rulers. This wasn't just politics, it was a sacred claim that would define Japanese authority for centuries. The Yamato court absorbed influences from Korea and China. Writing systems, Buddhism, Confucian philosophy, centralized law codes. Japan became a cultural sponge, adapting foreign ideas but always reshaping them into something uniquely Japanese. In 604 CE, Prince Shotoku issued the 17-article constitution, a set of moral guidelines blending Confucian and Buddhist principles. And in 645, the Taika reforms reorganized the government into something resembling a Chinese-style bureaucracy. But unlike China, Japan's emperors were more symbolic than absolute. Real power often rested in aristocratic families, a theme that would repeat throughout Japan's history. Still, the imperial court at Nara and later Heian, Kyoto, created one of the world's most refined cultures. Poetry, calligraphy, and literature flourished. The tale of Genji, written by Lady Murasaki around the year 1000, is often called the world's first novel. It tells us of courtly love, intrigue, and melancholy, a window into the glittering but fragile aristocratic world. Yet, while nobles wrote poetry in palaces, far beyond Kyoto's walls, warriors were rising. And soon, the age of the samurai would begin. Power is never static. While the Heian aristocrats were busy writing poetry and perfecting calligraphy, a new class of warriors emerged from the provinces. These men lived by the bow and the blade, loyal not to the emperor in Kyoto, but to their local lords. They were called samurai, those who serve. At first, samurai were simply guards, hired muscle for wealthy estates. But Japan was a land where the sword soon outweighed the brush. By the late 12th century, these warriors would not only dominate the battlefield, they would dominate the government itself. The year was 1180. Two great clans, the Taira and the Minamoto, clashed in a civil war that would shake Japan. The Jinpei War was not just a struggle for power. It was a birth cry for a new era. Picture this: warriors in lacquered armor charging on horseback, arrows raining down like deadly hail, drums pounding on a battlefield. Tales of heroism and tragedy from this war became immortal in the tale of the Heike, Japan's Great War epic. In 1185, the Minamoto emerged victorious. Their leader, Minamoto no Yoritomo, established a new form of rule, the shogunate. The emperor remained a sacred figure, but real power now rested with the shogun, the supreme military commander. Japan had entered the age of warrior rule. Under the Kamakura shogunate, the samurai became the backbone of society. They fought, they died, and in return they were rewarded with land and privilege. But soon, Japan faced an enemy unlike any before. In 1274, ships appeared on the horizon. The Mongols, conquerors of half the known world, had come for Japan. Their armies brought advanced weapons, bombs, and sheer terror. The samurai fought valiantly, but the Mongols were overwhelming. And then, nature intervened. A typhoon struck, scattering the Mongol fleet. The Japanese believed it was no accident. They called it the kamikaze, the divine wind. The Mongols tried again in 1281, with an even larger fleet. Once more, a typhoon annihilated them. To the Japanese, it was proof that the gods themselves protected their islands. But victory came at a cost. The war drained resources, and with no new lands to conquer, many samurai went unpaid. Dissatisfaction grew, and power struggles began anew. By the 14th century, the shogunate weakened. Civil wars erupted. The Ashikaga clan seized power, moving the capital to Kyoto. Under their rule, Japanese culture blossomed. No theater, tea ceremony, and Zen gardens all flourished. Yet politically, Japan fractured. Regional lords, or daimyo, grew powerful, commanding their own samurai armies. The emperor was a figurehead, the shogun was weak, and the country teetered on chaos. And chaos did come. From the mid-15th to the early 17th century, Japan was plunged into the Sengoku Jidai, the age of warring states. Imagine a land torn apart by hundreds of castles, each ruled by an ambitious warlord. Alliances formed and shattered overnight. Samurai clashed in endless battles, their banners painting the hillsides with clan emblems. Villages were burned, peasants conscripted, betrayal lurking behind every oath. It was a time of blood and brilliance. Firearms, introduced by Portuguese traders in 1543, changed the face of warfare. Christianity spread among some daimyo and their subjects, while others rejected it violently. Out of this storm of chaos, three figures would rise, men who would, step by step, unite Japan under one rule. The first was a ruthless innovator. The second, a cunning strategist. The third, a patient unifier whose dynasty would last for centuries. Their names? Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, Tokugawa Ieyasu. But their story, the story of unification, is one of betrayal, ambition, and the relentless march of destiny. When a nation shatters into pieces, it often takes extraordinary figures to forge it back together. In Japan's case, three men rose above the chaos of the Sengoku Jidai. Together, they are remembered as the three unifiers of Japan. The first was Oda Nobunaga, a warlord feared as much as he was admired. In 1560, at the Battle of Okahazama, Nobunaga's smaller force defeated an army 10 times its size through sheer audacity. From that day, he was a rising star. Nobunaga was ruthless. He embraced new technology, especially firearms, and used them to devastating effect. At the Battle of Nagashino in 1575, his gunners mowed down the famed Takeda cavalry, forever changing Japanese warfare. But Nobunaga was more than a general. He encouraged free commerce, broke the power of Buddhist warrior monks, and dreamed of centralized Japan under his rule. His enemies called him the Demon King. Yet even demons can fall. In 1582, betrayed by his own general, Nobunaga was forced to commit seppuku, ritual suicide, in a burning temple. After Nobunaga's death, his loyal general rose to power, Toyotomi Hideyoshi. If Nobunaga was the sword, Hideyoshi was the master of cunning. Hideyoshi's story is extraordinary. Born a peasant, he climbed through the ranks to become Japan's ruler. No other man of such low birth had ever held so much power. He completed Nobunaga's work, subduing rival daimyo until almost all of Japan bowed before him. But Hideyoshi's ambitions went beyond Japan. In 1592, he launched invasions of Korea, hoping to conquer Ming China. At first, his army swept through Korea with terrifying speed. But fierce resistance, aided by Chinese forces and brilliant Korean naval commanders, stalled the Japanese advance. By the time Hideyoshi died in 1598, his dream of empire abroad had crumbled. Still, Hideyoshi had given Japan unity. But he left behind a dangerous problem: succession. His young son was too weak to hold the country together. And waiting patiently in the shadows was another man. That man was Tokugawa Ieyasu. Cunning, patient, and calculating, Ieyasu outlasted rivals, built alliances, and struck at the perfect moment. In 1600, at the Battle of Sekigahara, the fate of Japan was decided. Imagine vast armies clashing across foggy fields, banners fluttering, muskets thundering. At a critical moment, several daimyo betrayed their allies, siding with Ieyasu. Victory was his. 3 years later, he became shogun, and the Tokugawa shogunate was born. It would last for more than 250 years. The Tokugawa era, also known as the Edo period, was one of the most remarkable in Japanese history. After centuries of war, peace finally reigned. But peace came at a price. Tokugawa Ieyasu and his successors imposed a rigid social order. At the top were the samurai, not as warriors but as administrators and bureaucrats. Below them, peasants, artisans, and merchants. Everyone had a place, and everyone was expected to stay in it. To control the daimyo, the shogunate introduced the Sankin-kotai system, a requirement that lords spend alternating years in Edo, modern Tokyo, under the shogun's watchful eye. Their families, meanwhile, were kept in Edo almost like hostages. And then came the boldest move, sakoku, or the closed country policy. From the 1630s, Japan cut itself off from most of the outside world. Foreigners were expelled, Christianity was banned, and trade was tightly controlled, limited mostly to a small Dutch outpost in Nagasaki. To the outside world, Japan became a mystery, an island sealed in silence. Yet isolation did not mean stagnation. In fact, Edo Japan developed a vibrant culture. Kabuki theater dazzled audiences with flamboyant costumes and dramatic performances. Ukiyo-e woodblock prints captured the floating world of pleasure districts, actors, and courtesans, images that would later inspire Western artists like Van Gogh. The haiku flourished, with poets like Matsuo Basho distilling profound beauty into just 17 syllables. Tea ceremonies, Zen gardens, and bonsai all reflected Japan's aesthetic of simplicity and harmony. But beneath the calm, change brewed. Merchants, though socially low, became wealthy. Samurai, once noble warriors, grew indebted and restless. And across the sea, the world was changing fast. One day, Japan's isolation would end, and when it did, it would never be the same again. For over 2 centuries, Japan lived in self-imposed isolation. The outside world knew little of the mysterious islands across the Pacific. But in 1853, the silence was broken. American warships, black with smoke and bristling with cannons, sailed into Edo Bay. They were commanded by Commodore Matthew Perry. To the Japanese, these were the black ships, terrifying symbols of foreign power. Perry's message was simple: open Japan to trade or face destruction. The Tokugawa shogunate, recognizing its military weakness, signed treaties with the United States and European powers. These agreements were unequal, humiliating, Japan's sovereignty was slipping away, and with it, the legitimacy of the shogunate. Unrest exploded. Samurai who once enforced Tokugawa order now turned against it. Their rallying cry? Revere the emperor, expel the barbarians. By the 1860s, civil war raged. Pro-shogun forces clashed with those demanding restoration of imperial power. In 1868, the Tokugawa were defeated. The emperor, still a young boy, was restored as the symbolic ruler of a new era. It was called the Meiji Restoration, and it changed everything. The leaders of the new government knew the truth. If Japan did not modernize, it would be colonized. So they moved with astonishing speed. Samurai privileges were abolished. Feudal domains were replaced by prefectures. A conscript army was created. Western science, industry, and technology poured in. Steamships replaced sailing vessels. Railways connected cities. Telegraph lines carried messages across the country. The capital moved from Kyoto to Edo, renamed Tokyo, the eastern capital. Japan adopted a constitution, modeled partly on Germany's, and established a parliament. But make no mistake, real power remained in the hands of small elite. For ordinary people, life was transformed. Old top knots were cut, Western-style uniforms and suits appeared, and the nation seemed to leap centuries in just decades. In the early 20th century, Japan continued to grow stronger. It annexed Korea in 1910. During World War I, it sided with the Allies, seizing German colonies in the Pacific. By the 1930s, Japan's economy and population demanded resources: oil, coal, iron. The military began to dominate politics. Nationalist fervor rose. The cult of the emperor intensified, blending Shinto mythology with modern propaganda. In 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria. In 1937, it launched full-scale war against China, committing atrocities such as the Nanjing Massacre. And then, on December 7, 1941, Japan struck at the United States, attacking Pearl Harbor. At first, Japan's empire expanded rapidly across Asia and the Pacific. But the tide turned. Battles at Midway, Guadalcanal, and the Philippine Sea broke Japan's naval power. By 1945, the homeland faced devastation. And then came the unthinkable. On August 6, 1945, Hiroshima was obliterated by the world's first atomic bomb. 3 days later, Nagasaki suffered the same fate. Over 100,000 lives were extinguished in seconds. On August 15th, Emperor Hirohito spoke directly to his people for the first time. His voice crackled through radios across the nation. Japan would surrender. The empire was gone. The war was over. When the war ended in 1945, Japan was a land in ruins. Cities reduced to rubble, industry destroyed, millions homeless. For many, survival itself seemed uncertain. Yet in this darkest moment, a rebirth began. Under American occupation, Japan adopted a new constitution. The emperor became a symbolic figure, stripped of political power. Democracy was introduced. Women gained the right to vote. The military was dismantled. Japan swore never again to wage aggressive war. At first, the economy struggled. But then came something extraordinary. With U.S. aid and its people's relentless work ethic, Japan launched into rapid recovery. By the 1960s, Japan's economic miracles stunned the world. Factories produced not just cheap goods, but high-quality technology. Cars, electronics, cameras. Names like Toyota, Sony, and Nikon became global brands. The 1964 Tokyo Olympics showcased a reborn nation. Neon-lit skyscrapers rose where firebombs once fell. Bullet trains sped across the country, symbols of efficiency and progress. From the ashes of war, Japan had reinvented itself again. So what do we make of this journey? From prehistoric pottery to space-age robotics. From isolation to empire. From destruction to rebirth. Japan's history is a story of extremes. War and peace, tradition and change, tragedy and triumph. It is a land shaped by contradictions. A nation that closes itself off, only to reinvent the world. A people who bow in humility, yet rise with unstoppable ambition. And perhaps that is Japan's greatest strength, its ability to transform, to fall and rise again. So the question remains, after thousands of years of myth and history, what comes next? Is Japan's greatest story the one still waiting to be written?